How and whether we scootily poop ends up saying a lot about America, and also people in general. So one response to the massive changes brought about by the shift to an industrialized market economy was to create utopian communities where people could separate themselves from the worst aspects of this brave new world. The most famous at the time, and arguably still, were the Shakers, who were famous for their excellent furniture, so you can't say that they really fully withdrew from the market system. Still, Shaker communities did separate themselves from the competition that characterized free markets, especially in terms of the competition for mates. They were celibate, and therefore only able to increase their numbers by recruitment, which was made a little bit difficult by celibacy. But they did do a lot of dancing to sublimate their libidinous urges. They embraced equality of the sexes, and at their peak they had more than 6,000 members. Today, they are still one of the most successful utopian communities to have emerged in the 19th century. They have 3 members. Much more successful in the long run were the Latter-day Saints, also called Mormons, although at the time their ideas were so far out of the mainstream that they were persecuted and chased from New York all the way to Utah. In addition to the Bible, the LDS Church holds the Book of Mormon as a holy scripture, which tells of the resurrected Jesus' visits to the Americas. And while it was subject to widespread persecution and even some massacres, the LDS Church continued to grow, and in fact continues to today. So while some of these communities were based in religion, others were more worldly attempts to create new models of society, like Brook Farm. Founded in 1841 by a group of transcendentalists as a dependent clause that always ends in failure, Brook Farm tried to show that manual labor and intellectual engagement could be successfully mixed. This community drew on the ideas of the French socialist Charles Fourier, who, as you may recall from Crash Course World History, believed no joke that socialism would eventually turn the seas into lemonade. And much like Fourier's planned communities, Brook Farm did not work out, largely because, and I can say this with some authority, writers do not enjoy farming. Nathaniel Hawthorne, for instance, complained about having to shovel horse manure, but if he'd only kept shoveling horse manure, he might not have shoveled the Blythedale romances onto an unsuspecting reading public. I'm sorry, Nathaniel Hawthorne, I do like The Scarlet Letter, but I feel like the only reason you're read is because you were like the only author in pre-Civil War America. So either we had to pretend that America began with Huck Finn's Journey on the Mississippi, or else we're stuck with you. It was just like you, Thomas Paine, Mary Rowlandson, a bunch of printed sermons, and James Fenimore Pooper. Anyway, the most utopian of the utopian communities were set up at Utopia, Ohio, and Modern Times, New York by Josiah Warren. Everything here was supposed to be totally unregulated and voluntary, including marriage, which, as you can imagine, worked out brilliantly. But without any laws to regulate behavior, Warren's communities were individualism on steroids, so they collapsed spectacularly and quickly. But these utopian communities were relatively rare. Many more 19th century Americans participated in efforts to reform society rather than just withdraw from it. And behind most of those reform movements was religion, particularly relations. It's also where John Humphrey Noyes founded his Oneida community, in which postmenopausal women introduced teenage boys to sex, and which eventually ceased being a religious community and evolved into, wait for it, one of the world's largest silverware companies. That's right, every time you take a bite of food with Oneida cutlery, you're celebrating free love and May-December relationships. Well, more like February-December relationships. So yes,